The blood on Helena's hands had long since dried by the time she stumbled into the small chapel at the edge of the ranch. Her traveling dress, torn and dusty from 3 days of desperate flight across the California wilderness. It was late September of 1873, and the golden hills surrounding San Andreas shimmered in the afternoon heat, as Helena Abbott collapsed onto the rough-hewn pew at the front of the modest wooden structure. She had not meant to kill the man back in Sacramento. Self-defense, they would call it in a court of law, but Helena knew the dead man's brother was a circuit judge who would never allow justice to prevail over vengeance. So she had run, taking only what money she had saved from her work as a seamstress and the clothes on her back. The chapel was simple, just 4 walls and a peaked roof with a small wooden cross hanging above a plain altar. Sunlight filtered through gaps in the boards, creating stripes of gold across the dusty floor. Helena's knees hit the worn wood as she sank down, her hands clasping together so tightly her knuckles went white. She had not prayed in years, not since her mother died when Helena was 16, but now the words came tumbling out in desperate whispers. "Please," she breathed, her voice cracking with exhaustion and fear. "Please, I do not know what to do. I do not know where to go. I am so tired of running, so tired of being afraid. If there is any mercy left in this world, please show me a sign that I can survive this." She did not hear the door open behind her. She did not hear the soft footsteps approaching. She was lost in her prayer, tears finally breaking free and streaming down her dirt-smudged cheeks as weeks of fear and loneliness crashed over her like a wave. Zachary Garrett had built the chapel himself 5 years ago when he purchased the ranch, a tribute to his late wife, who had believed in the power of prayer even as consumption slowly stole her life. He came here most evenings to sit in the quiet and remember her gentle smile, to feel close to something greater than himself. He had not expected to find a young woman collapsed in prayer when he pushed open the door that afternoon. For a long moment, he simply stood there, taking in the sight of her. She was young, perhaps 23 or 24, with dark auburn hair that had fallen from its pins and hung in tangled waves down her back. Her dress had once been a respectable deep blue, but was now stained with dust and what looked like old blood. She trembled as she prayed, her whole body shaking with emotion. Something in Zachary's chest tightened. He had been alone for 3 years since Margaret died, running his cattle ranch with only his ranch hands for company. He had grown accustomed to solitude, had even welcomed it. But seeing this stranger so broken and afraid awakened something protective in him that he had thought died with his wife. He moved forward slowly, his boots barely making a sound on the wooden floor. When he reached the pew beside her, he lowered himself to his knees, his weathered hands folding together as naturally as if he had been planning this all along. Helena's eyes flew open at the presence beside her. She gasped and tried to scramble backward, but her exhausted body would not cooperate. She ended up simply staring at the man who had joined her in prayer, her heart hammering in her chest. He was tall, even kneeling, with broad shoulders that spoke of hard physical labor. His face was tanned and lined from years in the sun, his dark hair touched with gray at the temples. He might have been 35 or 40, she could not quite tell. But what struck her most were his eyes, a striking gray-green that looked at her with such calm steadiness that her panic began to ease. "I do not mean to frighten you," Zachary said quietly, his voice deep and measured. "This is my chapel, my ranch, but you are welcome here. I thought perhaps you could use someone to pray alongside you." "I should go," Helena whispered, though she made no move to rise. "I should not be here." "Are you in trouble?" Zachary asked, his gaze steady on her face. Helena's jaw worked as she tried to decide how much to tell this stranger. Finally, she nodded once, a jerky movement that seemed to cost her greatly. "Then stay," Zachary said simply. He turned his attention back to his clasped hands, bowing his head. "Lord, I do not know this woman's name or her circumstances, but I can see she is afraid and alone. I ask that you guide both of us. Show me how to help her, if that is your will. And show her that she is not abandoned, that there is still hope and goodness in this world. Give us both the wisdom to know what path to take from here, together or apart as you see fit." The word "together" hung in the air between them, and Helena felt something shift in her chest. This stranger was praying for her future as if it somehow involved him, as if her burden had already become partially his own. She had been alone for so long, carrying her fear and guilt like stones in her pockets, that the idea of someone else shouldering even a portion of that weight made her want to weep all over again. "Amen," Zachary finished quietly. "Amen," Helena echoed, her voice barely audible. They knelt there in silence for several long minutes. Outside, Helena could hear cattle lowing in the distance and the sound of men calling to one another as they went about their work. Normal sounds, safe sounds. She closed her eyes and let them wash over her. Finally, Zachary rose to his feet with the easy grace of a man accustomed to physical labor. He extended a hand down to Helena. "Can you stand? You look like you have not eaten properly in days." Helena stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment before placing her smaller, trembling hand in his. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip gentle but firm as he pulled her to her feet. She swayed slightly, and his other hand came up to steady her elbow. "When did you last eat?" he asked, his brow furrowing with concern. "Yesterday morning," Helena admitted. "Some bread I bought in a town whose name I do not remember." Zachary's expression darkened slightly, though Helena sensed his anger was not directed at her. "Come to the house. My housekeeper will have supper started. You can eat, clean up, and rest. Then, if you wish, you can tell me what brought you to my chapel in such a state." "I cannot impose," Helena began, but Zachary was already guiding her gently toward the door. "It is not an imposition if I am offering," he said firmly. "I built this chapel as a place of sanctuary. It would be poor faith indeed if I turned away someone who clearly needs help." Helena wanted to argue, wanted to insist that she could not involve this kind stranger in her troubles. But her legs were shaking with exhaustion. Her stomach was a tight knot of hunger, and the warmth of his hand on her elbow felt like the first human kindness she had experienced in months. So instead, she simply nodded and allowed him to lead her out into the golden afternoon sunlight. The ranch house was a sturdy two-story structure built from local timber, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and side. It was clearly well maintained, with fresh paint on the shutters and a neat garden of vegetables growing beside the front steps. Helena caught sight of several ranch hands working near the barn, and she instinctively tried to shrink into herself, but Zachary seemed to sense her discomfort. "They are good men," he said quietly, "but if you would prefer not to be seen, we can enter through the side door." Helena nodded gratefully, and he steered them away from the main entrance and around to a smaller door that led directly into a large, well-appointed kitchen. A woman of about 50 looked up from the pot she was stirring on the cast-iron stove, her weathered face showing surprise at the unexpected visitor. "Mr. Garrett," she said, her gaze moving between Zachary and Helena with open curiosity. "I was not expecting company for supper." "This is Miss," Zachary paused, looking at Helena expectantly. "Abbott," Helena supplied quietly. "Helena Abbott. Miss Abbott found her way to the chapel and is in need of a hot meal and a place to rest," Zachary said smoothly. "Can you prepare a bath for her while I set another place at the table?" The housekeeper, who introduced herself as Mrs. Chen, did not ask questions. She simply nodded and bustled about with efficient kindness, heating water and preparing the small washroom off the kitchen. Within 20 minutes, Helena found herself alone in the steaming bath, scrubbing days of dirt and fear from her skin. The dress she had been wearing was ruined, but Mrs. Chen had left a clean cotton dress hanging on a hook, simple but serviceable. It was slightly too large, and Helena realized with a pang that it must have belonged to Zachary's late wife. The thought should have made her uncomfortable, but instead, she felt a strange sense of comfort, as if the previous owner's kindness was reaching forward through time to embrace her. When she emerged from the washroom, her hair clean and braided down her back, she found Zachary seated at the large wooden table in the dining room adjacent to the kitchen. He had changed as well, trading his dusty work clothes for clean trousers and a simple white shirt. He stood when she entered, his eyes widening slightly. "You look much improved," he said, pulling out a chair for her. Helena felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Thank you for everything. I do not know how I can repay your kindness." "Eat first," Zachary said as Mrs. Chen appeared with plates laden with roasted chicken, fresh vegetables, and thick slices of bread. "Then we can talk." Helena discovered that she was ravenously hungry. She tried to maintain proper manners, but after days of near starvation, it was difficult not to simply devour everything in front of her. Zachary ate at a more measured pace, but she noticed he kept glancing at her with an expression that might have been satisfaction at seeing her eat so heartily. Mrs. Chen disappeared after serving the meal, giving them privacy. When Helena had finally satisfied her immediate hunger, she sat back in her chair and found Zachary watching her with those steady gray-green eyes. "Will you tell me what happened?" he asked quietly. "Why were you running?" Helena's hands twisted in her lap. She had been dreading this question, knowing that the truth might cause this kind man to turn her away. But she also sensed that Zachary was not a man who appreciated lies. "I killed a man," she said bluntly, watching his expression for signs of judgment or fear. Zachary's face remained calm. "Was it self-defense?" Helena nodded, tears pricking at her eyes again. "I worked as a seamstress in Sacramento. He was a customer, the son of a wealthy family. He had been making advances for weeks, and I always refused him politely. But 3 nights ago he came to my room above the shop after dark. He had been drinking. He forced his way in and he tried to force himself on me." Her voice cracked, and she had to pause to collect herself. Zachary said nothing, but she saw his jaw tighten and his hands curl into fists on the table. "I had scissors on my bedside table," Helena continued. "When he pushed me onto the bed, I grabbed them and I stabbed him. I did not mean to kill him. Truly, I did not. I only wanted him to stop, to leave me alone. But I must have hit something vital because he bled so much, and within minutes he was dead." "Then you acted in defense of your life and your virtue," Zachary said firmly. "That is not murder. That is survival." "His brother is Judge Calloway," Helena said miserably. "William Calloway. Everyone knows he is corrupt, that he rules his courtroom like a king. If I had stayed, if I had let them arrest me, I would have hanged. So I ran. I took what money I had and I just ran. I have been moving from town to town, staying nowhere more than a night, terrified that someone would recognize me or that the law would catch up with me." She looked up at Zachary, her eyes pleading for understanding. "I know I should have stayed and faced trial. I know running makes me look guilty, but I was so afraid. I am still so afraid." Zachary was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant as he thought. Finally, he leaned forward, his forearms resting on the table. "Judge Calloway's jurisdiction does not extend here," he said slowly. "San Andreas has its own sheriff, its own circuit judge. And more importantly, I know them both." Sheriff Martinez is a fair man and Judge Thompson is known for his integrity. If what you have told me is the truth, and I believe it is, then you have nothing to fear here." "But they will be looking for me," Helena protested. "If Judge Calloway has issued a warrant, then every lawman in California will be watching for me." "Perhaps," Zachary acknowledged, "but you said yourself that this happened only 3 nights ago." "It takes time for warrants to be issued and distributed, especially outside a judge's immediate jurisdiction. And in the meantime, you need rest and safety. I am offering you both." Helena stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "Why would you do this? You do not know me." "For all you know, I could be lying about everything." Zachary met her gaze steadily. "When I knelt beside you in that chapel, I prayed for guidance. I prayed to know whether I should help you. And do you know what I felt?" Helena shook her head mutely. "Peace," Zachary said simply. "Complete and total peace. I have not felt that way since before my wife died. So either that was God telling me this is the right path, or my instincts are telling me you are a good woman in a terrible situation. Either way, I choose to trust that feeling." "I do not understand you," Helena whispered. "Men do not simply help women like this without expecting something in return." Zachary's expression softened. "I know the world has given you little reason to trust, especially after what that man did to you. But I give you my word, Helena Abbott, that I expect nothing from you except the truth. Stay here as long as you need. Work if it makes you feel better about accepting help. I can always use someone with sewing skills, and the men are forever tearing their clothes. But you are not obligated to me in any way. You are simply a person who needed sanctuary, and I had the means to provide it." Helena felt the tears come again, but this time they were born of relief rather than fear. "Thank you," she managed to say through her tight throat. "Thank you so much." Zachary smiled, and Helena noticed how it transformed his face, softening the hard lines and making him look younger. "You are welcome. Now you look dead on your feet. Mrs. Chen has prepared a room for you upstairs. Get some sleep, and we will talk more in the morning about what comes next." Helena allowed herself to be led upstairs to a small but comfortable bedroom with a real bed, soft quilts, and lace curtains at the window. She barely remembered her head hitting the pillow before sleep claimed her, deep and dreamless for the first time in weeks. When Helena woke, sunlight was streaming through the window and she could hear the sounds of the ranch coming to life outside. For a moment, she was disoriented, unsure where she was. Then memory flooded back and she sat up quickly, her heart racing. Had it all been real? Had she truly found sanctuary with a stranger who asked nothing in return? A soft knock at the door answered her question. "Miss Abbott," Mrs. Chen's voice called. "I have breakfast ready downstairs when you are dressed. Mr. Garrett asked me to let you sleep as long as you needed." "Thank you," Helena called back. "I will be down shortly." She found her blue dress cleaned and mended, hanging in the wardrobe along with 2 other simple dresses that must have belonged to Zachary's late wife. Helena chose the blue one, wanting something familiar, and made her way downstairs. Zachary was already seated at the kitchen table, reviewing what looked like ranch ledgers. He looked up when she entered and gestured to the chair across from him. "Good morning. I trust you slept well." "Better than I have in weeks," Helena admitted, accepting a plate of eggs and bacon from Mrs. Chen with a grateful smile. "I cannot remember the last time I felt so rested." "Good." Zachary closed his ledger and gave her his full attention. "I have been thinking about your situation. I rode into town early this morning and spoke with Sheriff Martinez. I did not give him any names or details, but I asked hypothetically about Judge Calloway's reach and about how cases of self-defense are typically handled." Helena's stomach clenched with anxiety. "What did he say?" "He confirmed what I suspected." Calloway has no jurisdiction here, and Sheriff Martinez has no respect for the man. He called him a bully and a tyrant. He also said that if a case of clear self-defense were brought before Judge Thompson, the defendant would be treated fairly. The victim's family connections would not matter. "But I ran," Helena said quietly. "Does that not make me look guilty?" "It makes you look afraid," Zachary corrected gently, "which is understandable given the circumstances." Martinez said that if someone were to turn themselves in voluntarily, with a good lawyer and credible testimony, Judge Thompson would likely view the flight as fear rather than guilt, especially in a case involving attempted assault. Helena's hands trembled around her coffee cup. "You are suggesting I turn myself in." "I am suggesting you stop running," Zachary said. "I am suggesting you stay here where you are safe and let me help you build a case to clear your name." Martinez mentioned that John Perry, a lawyer in town, has experience with these kinds of cases. He is known for taking on clients that other lawyers would not touch, and he has a reputation for honesty. "I cannot afford a lawyer," Helena said miserably. "I barely have enough money left for a stage ticket out of California." "I will pay for it," Zachary said firmly. Helena's head jerked up. "Absolutely not. You have already done too much. I cannot accept that." "Why not?" "Because I have nothing to offer you in return." Zachary leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Helena, may I ask you something personal?" She nodded warily. "When my wife was dying, do you know what she made me promise her?" Zachary's voice was soft, but there was steel underneath. "She made me promise that I would not let grief turn me into a hard man. She made me promise that if I ever had the chance to help someone, truly help them, I would do it. She said that was the only way she could leave this world in peace, knowing that her death might somehow lead to good for someone else." He met Helena's eyes directly. "You stumbling into my chapel yesterday, that was the first time since Margaret died that I have felt like I had a purpose beyond simply existing. Let me help you. Not because you owe me anything, but because it is what she would have wanted, because it is what I want." Helena felt her resolve crumbling. Everything in her life had taught her to be suspicious of kindness, to look for the hidden cost. But when she looked at Zachary, all she saw was sincerity and a bone-deep loneliness that mirrored her own. "If I stay," she said slowly, "I will work. I will earn my keep. I will not be a charity case." A smile tugged at the corner of Zachary's mouth. "Mrs. Chen has been begging me to hire help for months. The house is too big for one person to manage, and as I mentioned, my men are forever tearing their work clothes. If you truly want to work, there is more than enough to keep you occupied." "Then I will stay," Helena said, feeling as if she were leaping off a cliff into unknown water. "At least until we can speak with this lawyer and determine if there is any hope of clearing my name." "There is hope," Zachary said with quiet conviction. "I feel it." Over the following days, Helena settled into a routine that felt almost surreal after weeks of running. She rose with the sun and worked alongside Mrs. Chen, cleaning and cooking and managing the household. In the afternoons, she would set up a sewing station on the porch and repair the endless pile of torn shirts, split seams, and missing buttons that accumulated from the ranch hands' hard work. The men were initially wary of her, curious about the mysterious woman who had appeared from nowhere. But Helena kept her head down and her hands busy, speaking when spoken to but otherwise maintaining a polite distance. Gradually, they accepted her presence, tipping their hats when they passed and offering awkward thank yous when she returned their mended clothes. Zachary gave her space during the day, occupied with running the ranch. But most evenings after supper, they would sit on the porch together and talk. At first, the conversations were superficial discussions of the weather and the ranch. But slowly, carefully, they began to share deeper things. Helena learned that Zachary had come to California during the gold rush in 1849, just a young man of 18 seeking his fortune. He had not found gold, but he had found something better, a talent for raising cattle and a piece of land that suited him perfectly. He had met Margaret in San Francisco when he went to sell his first successful herd. She had been the daughter of a dry goods merchant, refined and educated, with no business falling in love with a rough rancher. But love them they had, marrying within 6 months and building a life together on this land. She was the one who insisted on the chapel, Zachary said one evening as they watched the sun set over the golden hills. I told her I could pray just as well under the open sky, but she wanted a dedicated space, something permanent. I think she knew even then that she was sick, though she never said so. How long were you married? Helena asked softly. 10 years. We tried for children, but it never happened. Maybe that was God's way of knowing she would not be here to raise them. His voice was matter of fact, but Helena heard the old pain underneath. In turn, Helena shared her own story. She told him about growing up in St. Louis, the daughter of a tailor and a mother who took in laundry to make ends meet. She told him about her father's death from cholera when she was 15, and her mother's death from grief and exhaustion just a year later. She told him about learning her father's trade and making her way west, thinking California might offer better opportunities. I was doing well in Sacramento, she said, staring out at the darkening sky. I had regular customers, enough money to eat and pay rent. I was even starting to think about maybe opening my own shop someday. Then he came in and everything fell apart. Zachary's hand found hers on the porch rail, his calloused fingers gentle. It will come together again, I promise you that. Helena looked at their joined hands, feeling her heart do something complicated in her chest. Over the past week, she had found herself increasingly aware of Zachary as more than just her benefactor. She noticed the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the deep timbre of his voice when he spoke softly, the easy strength in his movements. She noticed how he always made sure she had taken enough food before he served himself, how he always asked about her day with genuine interest, how he looked at her sometimes with an expression she could not quite name. It terrified her. She had no business developing feelings for this man, not when her future was so uncertain, not when she was essentially living on his charity, and yet she could not seem to help herself. "Zachary," she said quietly, not looking at him, "why did you never remarry? It has been 3 years. Surely you must have had opportunities." His hand tightened slightly on hers. "I suppose I was waiting for the right reason. Margaret and I, we loved each other, truly loved each other. I did not want to settle for anything less than that again. And honestly, I did not think I would ever feel that way about anyone else." Did not. Helena's heart was hammering as she finally turned to look at him. Zachary met her gaze, and in the dying light, his eyes were the color of a storm-swept sea. "Helena, I know this is neither the time nor the place to speak of such things. I know you have more than enough to worry about without me adding complications. But I need you to know that these past 2 weeks, having you here, they have woken something in me that I thought was dead. When I knelt beside you in that chapel and prayed for our future together, I think part of me already knew." "Knew what?" Helena whispered, though she thought she might already understand. "That you were the reason God led me to that chapel that day. That helping you was not just about giving sanctuary to a stranger. It was about finding something I did not even know I was still looking for." Helena's breath caught. "I am a woman accused of murder. I may hang. How can you possibly think I could be part of your future?" "Because I do not believe you will hang. Because I believe in your innocence and injustice, even if it takes time to prevail. And because when I look at you, I see someone brave and strong and kind, someone who has survived terrible things and still has the capacity to smile. That is not someone who deserves to lose their future. That is someone worth fighting for. Tears blurred Helena's vision. I have feelings for you too, she admitted, her voice breaking. I have been trying so hard not to, because it feels wrong to burden you with that when you have already given me so much. But I cannot help it. You make me feel safe in a way I have never felt before. You make me want to believe that there might be a future worth hoping for. Zachary's free hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb gently wiping away a tear. Then let us believe in it together. Let us fight for it together. You are not alone anymore, Helena. Whatever comes, we face it as a team. As a team, Helena repeated, leaning into his touch and allowing herself, for the first time in her life, to truly believe that someone might genuinely care for her. The next morning, Zachary rode into San Andreas and returned with John Perry, the lawyer. Perry was a man in his mid-40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. He listened intently as Helena recounted her story, occasionally interrupting to ask clarifying questions. When she finished, he sat back in his chair and steepled his fingers thoughtfully. "Miss Abbott, I will be direct with you," he said. "Your case is winnable, but it will not be easy. Judge Calloway will have issued a warrant by now, and while it may not carry official weight here, the story will have spread. We will need witnesses to your character, evidence of the assault if any exists, and a judge willing to hear the case fairly." "Judge Thompson," Zachary said. "Sheriff Martinez said he was fair." Perry nodded. "Thompson is one of the few judges in California I would trust with a case like this. But here is the complication. We would need to get Miss Abbott in front of him officially. That means voluntarily surrendering to Sheriff Martinez and hoping that Calloway does not manage to have her extradited back to Sacramento before the hearing. Is that likely?" Helena asked, her stomach churning with anxiety. "Calloway will certainly try," Perry admitted. "But there are laws about extradition, procedures that must be followed. If we move quickly and present our case to Judge Thompson immediately, we may be able to secure protection against extradition until the matter is settled. It is a risk, but in my professional opinion, it is a risk worth taking. The alternative is you running for the rest of your life, always looking over your shoulder." Helena looked at Zachary, who had been silent throughout most of the conversation. He met her gaze steadily, and she saw only support and confidence there. "What do you want to do?" he asked quietly. "This is your decision, Helena. Whatever you choose, I will stand by you." Helena took a deep breath, thinking of her mother who had taught her that courage was not the absence of fear but the choice to act despite it. "I want to fight. I want to clear my name. I am tired of running." Perry's stern face broke into an approving smile. "Good. Then here is what we are going to do." The plan was set in motion the following day. Helena, accompanied by Zachary and John Perry, rode into San Andreas and presented herself at the sheriff's office. Sheriff Martinez was a stocky man with graying hair and kind eyes. He listened to Perry's explanation of the situation and nodded slowly. "I received word about a warrant from Judge Calloway just yesterday," he admitted. "But Perry is right, Miss Abbott. If you are surrendering voluntarily and requesting a hearing, I am obligated to hold you here rather than immediately transferring you to Sacramento. However, I will need to keep you in custody until the hearing." Helena had expected this, but it still made her stomach drop. The thought of being locked in a cell, even temporarily, brought back all her fear and panic. "She can stay in the women's cell," Martinez continued, seeing her distress. "It is clean and you will be safe there. I will send word to Judge Thompson immediately and request an emergency hearing. Given the circumstances, I expect he will schedule it within a week." "Can I visit her?" Zachary asked, his hand finding Helena's and squeezing gently. Martinez nodded. "During regular visiting hours, yes. I do not see any reason to deny that." The next week was one of the longest of Helena's life. The cell was indeed clean, with a cot, a wash basin, and a small window that let in sunlight. But it was still a cage, and Helena had to fight against the panic that threatened to overwhelm her every time she heard the door lock behind the sheriff. Zachary came every day, always during the afternoon visiting hours. He brought her books to read, news from the ranch, and most importantly, his steady, calming presence. They would sit on opposite sides of the cell bars and talk for the allotted hour, and those conversations became Helena's lifeline. "The men are asking after you," Zachary told her on the third day. "Particularly old Sam. He said his lucky shirt, the one you mended, helped him win at cards last night. He wanted me to tell you thank you." Helena managed a small smile. "Tell him he is welcome, and that luck in cards rarely lasts." "I will let him discover that on his own." Zachary's expression grew more serious. "Perry came by this morning. Judge Thompson has scheduled your hearing for the day after tomorrow. He also said that Calloway has already sent a letter demanding your immediate transfer to Sacramento, but Thompson denied the request pending the hearing." "That is good, right?" Helena asked nervously. "That is very good. It means Thompson is taking your case seriously and is not going to be bullied by Calloway's reputation." Helena nodded, trying to let that comfort her. "Zachary, I need to ask you something. Anything. If this goes badly, if Thompson rules against me and I have to go back to Sacramento for trial, I need you to promise me you will not follow, that you will go back to your ranch and your life and forget about me." Zachary's expression hardened. "I cannot promise you that." "Please," Helena said, her voice breaking. "You have already risked so much for me. I cannot bear the thought of you wasting your life waiting for a future that might never come." Zachary leaned forward until his face was close to the bars, close to her. "Helena Abbott, you listen to me. I did not kneel beside you in that chapel and pray for our future together just to give up at the first real obstacle. If Thompson rules against you, then I will hire the best lawyers in California. I will travel to Sacramento myself and testify on your behalf. I will move heaven and earth if that is what it takes. You are not getting rid of me that easily." Despite everything, Helena felt herself smile through her tears. "You are impossibly stubborn." "I prefer to think of it as loyal," Zachary said with a slight grin. "Now, stop trying to push me away and conserve your energy for the hearing. Perry said you will need to testify, and you will need to be strong." The morning of the hearing arrived gray and overcast, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. Sheriff Martinez brought Helena a clean dress, another one from Margaret's wardrobe that Zachary had provided, and allowed her extra time to prepare herself. Her hands shook as she braided her hair, but she forced herself to breathe deeply and remember Zachary's words. She was not alone. Whatever happened, she would face it with allies by her side. The courtroom was a simple wooden building adjacent to the sheriff's office. Judge Thompson presided from a raised desk at the front, a stern-looking man in his 60s with white hair and piercing blue eyes. The room was sparsely populated, just Perry at the defense table, a prosecutor named Collins who looked decidedly uncomfortable with his assignment, Sheriff Martinez, Zachary seated in the front row, and a handful of curious townspeople. "This is a preliminary hearing," Judge Thompson began, his voice carrying easily through the room, "to determine whether Miss Helena Abbott should be remanded to Sacramento to face charges of murder, or whether there is sufficient cause to believe she acted in lawful self-defense. Mr. Collins, You represent the prosecution. Present your case. Collins stood reluctantly. Your Honor, the facts are straightforward. Miss Abbott admits to killing Thomas Calloway on the night of September 22nd in Sacramento. She then fled the scene and the jurisdiction, which speaks to consciousness of guilt. The prosecution in Sacramento requests her immediate extradition to face trial. Mr. Perry. Judge Thompson turned to Helena's lawyer. Perry rose smoothly. Your Honor, Miss Abbott does not deny that she caused Thomas Calloway's death. However, the circumstances clearly indicate self-defense against a violent sexual assault. Mr. Calloway forced entry into Miss Abbott's private residence while intoxicated, with the clear intent to rape her. She defended herself with the only weapon available. Her flight was not born of guilt, but of legitimate fear that Judge Calloway, the victim's brother, would use his position to ensure she did not receive a fair trial. We have testimony to support this version of events. Let us hear it then, Thompson said, gesturing for them to proceed. The next 2 hours were grueling. Helena took the stand and recounted her story once more, fighting to keep her voice steady as she described Thomas Calloway's attack. Perry was gentle with her, asking questions that allowed her to explain clearly what had happened. Collins, to his credit, was not harsh in his cross-examination, seeming to recognize that there was little he could say to discredit her account without appearing to defend assault. Then Perry called Zachary to the stand. Helena watched anxiously as he was sworn in, afraid of what questions might be asked. Mr. Garrett, Perry began, how did you come to know Miss Abbott? She came to my ranch chapel in a state of great distress on September 25th, Zachary answered clearly. I found her praying for guidance. She told me her story and I believed her. I have offered her sanctuary and employment on my ranch. In the 2 weeks you have known Miss Abbott, what is your impression of her character? She is honest, hardworking, and kind, Zachary said without hesitation. She has conducted herself with complete propriety. She has earned the respect of my household staff and ranch hands. She is not the sort of person who would commit violence without just cause. Collins stood for cross-examination, but he seemed uncertain how to proceed. Mr. Garrett, is it not true that you have developed romantic feelings for the defendant? Helena's breath caught, but Zachary did not flinch. It is true, but my feelings do not change the facts of what happened to her, nor do they change my assessment of her character. I have known many people in my 40 years, Mr. Collins. I am a decent judge of character, and I would stake my reputation on Helena Abbott's innocence. Judge Thompson leaned forward with interest. Mr. Garrett, you are a respected landowner in this community. Your word carries weight. Are you prepared to take responsibility for Miss Abbott's conduct if I rule in her favor? Absolutely, Your Honor, Zachary said firmly. She has been living on my ranch under my protection. I vouch for her completely. Thompson nodded slowly and made a note. Collins called no further witnesses, having apparently decided that fighting this case too hard would not reflect well on anyone involved. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Judge Thompson rapped his gavel for order. I have heard enough. Miss Abbott, please stand. Helena rose on shaking legs, Perry beside her. Zachary leaned forward in his seat, his hands clasped tightly together. Miss Abbott, Thompson said, his voice grave but not unkind. This court finds that the evidence supports your claim of self-defense. Thomas Calloway's actions, as you have described them, constitute attempted rape, and you had every legal right to defend yourself with whatever force was necessary. The fact that he died as a result of that defense is unfortunate, but it does not make you a murderer. Helena felt her knees nearly buckle with relief, but Thompson was not finished. However, the matter of your flight from Sacramento is more complicated. While I understand your fear, leaving the jurisdiction without reporting the incident to authorities created legal complications. Therefore, I am issuing the following ruling. I will not extradite you to Sacramento. Instead, I am releasing you into the custody of Mr. Zachary Garrett, who has vouched for your character. You will remain in San Andreas for a period of no less than 6 months, during which time you will report weekly to Sheriff Martinez. If Judge Calloway wishes to pursue charges against you, he may petition this court, and we will handle the matter here, where I can ensure you receive a fair hearing. But in the meantime, you are free to go, Miss Abbott, with the understanding that you are to conduct yourself as a law-abiding citizen. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Helena managed to say through the tears streaming down her face. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you so much. Thompson's stern expression softened slightly. You have been through a terrible ordeal, Miss Abbott. I hope you find peace and healing here in San Andreas. This hearing is concluded. The gavel fell, and suddenly Zachary was there, having crossed the room in 3 long strides. He pulled Helena into his arms, holding her tight as she sobbed with relief against his chest. She was aware of Perry shaking their hands, of Sheriff Martinez offering congratulations, of the townspeople filing out with speculative whispers. But all that truly mattered was the solid warmth of Zachary's embrace and the knowledge that, for the first time in weeks, she was truly free. It is over, Zachary murmured into her hair. You are safe now. I told you we would fight this together, and we won. Helena pulled back just enough to look up at him, her hands clutching the front of his shirt. I cannot believe it. I thought for certain I would be sent back to Sacramento. Judge Thompson is a good man, Zachary said, brushing tears from her cheeks with his thumbs. And he saw the truth of what happened. No one will hurt you now. I will make sure of that. They rode back to the ranch in the late afternoon, the sky having cleared to reveal brilliant sunshine. Helena felt as if a massive weight had been lifted from her shoulders, as if she could breathe fully for the first time since that terrible night in Sacramento. When they arrived at the ranch, Mrs. Chen had prepared a celebratory dinner, and even the ranch hands raised glasses of whiskey and toasts to her freedom. That night, after everyone else had retired, Helena and Zachary found themselves once again on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The air was cool and pleasant, carrying the scent of dry grass and distant pine trees. I need to tell you something, Zachary said quietly, turning to face her. Something I have been thinking about since the hearing. Helena's heart began to beat faster. What is it? When Judge Thompson asked if I would take responsibility for you when I said yes, it made me realize something. He took her hands in his expression serious. Helena, I do not want to be just your guardian or your employer. I do not want you to stay here just because a judge ordered it. What do you want? Helena asked, though she thought she knew, hoped she knew. I want you to stay because you choose to, because you want to build a life here with me, because what I feel for you is not gratitude or responsibility, but something much deeper. Zachary, Helena breathed, her heart overflowing. I am in love with you, Helena Abbott, Zachary said, the words tumbling out as if he had been holding them back for too long. I know it has only been a few weeks. I know people will say it is too soon, that we barely know each other. But when I think about my future, the only version that makes sense is one with you in it. Not as my housekeeper or my ward, but as my partner. My wife, if you will have me. Helena felt as if the world had narrowed to just the two of them, to the earnest hope in his eyes and the warmth of his hands around hers. I love you too, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. I tried not to because it seemed impossible, impractical, but I cannot help it. When I am with you, I feel like I am finally home after years of wandering. Then marry me, Zachary said simply. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. When you are ready, let me give you the life you deserve, the safety and love you should have had all along. Yes, Helena said through her tears, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, I will marry you, Zachary Garrett. I cannot think of anything I want more. Zachary pulled her close and kissed her for the first time, gentle and reverent, as if she were something precious and fragile. Helena kissed him back, pouring all her hope and love and gratitude into the gesture. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. We should probably wait a respectable amount of time, Zachary said, though he sounded reluctant. I do not want anyone to think I took advantage of your situation. 3 months, Helena suggested. That gives me time to make a proper wedding dress and you time to prepare the ranch, and it is still well within the 6 months Judge Thompson required me to stay. 3 months, Zachary agreed, pulling her close again. Though I warn you, it is going to feel like an eternity. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Helena's life. She continued her work around the ranch, but now with a lightness in her step and a constant smile. Zachary courted her properly, bringing her wildflowers from the hills, taking her on rides around the property to show her every corner of the land that would soon be partly hers, sitting with her in the chapel to pray together. The town of San Andreas gradually learned the story of the mysterious woman living at the Garrett Ranch. Some were skeptical at first, but Helena's weekly visits to Sheriff Martinez, her quiet demeanor, and Zachary's obvious devotion won most people over. The few who remained judgmental found themselves largely ignored by the rest of the community. 6 weeks after the hearing, word came from Sacramento. Judge Calloway had indeed attempted to petition for Helena's extradition, but Judge Thompson had denied the request, citing his ruling and the lack of any new evidence. Furthermore, several witnesses had come forward in Sacramento, other women who had been harassed or assaulted by Thomas Calloway, giving credence to Helena's account. The matter was officially closed. You are truly free now, Zachary said when Perry brought them the news. No more weekly check-ins required. You can go anywhere you want. Helena looked around the ranch house parlor where they sat, at the home she had helped make comfortable, at the man whose life had become intertwined with hers. I want to stay here, she said simply. This is where I belong. They were married on a crisp December morning, 2 days before Christmas. The chapel that had first brought them together was decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons. Mrs. Chen had helped Helena sew a dress of cream-colored silk that fit perfectly. Sheriff Martinez gave her away, having become something of a friend over the past months. Judge Thompson performed the ceremony, his stern face breaking into a genuine smile as he pronounced them husband and wife. The ranch hands threw a celebration that lasted well into the night, with music and dancing and more food than could possibly be eaten. Helena danced with Zachary under the stars, her head resting on his shoulder, feeling more content than she had ever thought possible. Happy, Mrs. Garrett. Zachary murmured into her hair. Incredibly, Helena replied, lifting her head to kiss him softly. Thank you for finding me that day. Thank you for praying beside me. I should be thanking you, Zachary said, his arms tightening around her. You brought light back into my life when I thought there would only ever be shadows. You are the best gift I could have received. Their first year of marriage was marked by small, precious moments. Helena transformed the ranch house into a true home, adding touches of beauty and comfort to every room. She continued her sewing, not just for the ranch hands but for women in town who appreciated her skill and fair prices. Zachary taught her to ride properly, and they would often take evening rides together through the Golden Hills, talking about everything and nothing. In the spring, Helena realized she was pregnant. She told Zachary one evening in the chapel, the place where their story had truly begun. He wept with joy, holding her and thanking God for the blessing of new life. "Boy or girl, it does not matter," he said, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. "As long as you and the baby are healthy." "I think it will be a boy," Helena said, smiling. "A son who looks like his father." She was right. In late October of 1874, Helena gave birth to a healthy baby boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's auburn hints. They named him Samuel Zachary Garrett, after the old ranch hand who had become like family and the father who had saved Helena's life in more ways than one. Zachary was a devoted father, often found walking the floor with Samuel in the middle of the night, singing soft lullabies that made Helena's heart ache with love. Watching him with their son, seeing the gentleness and patience he showed, only deepened her feelings for him. The years passed peacefully. Samuel grew into a bright, energetic child who loved the ranch and the animals. When he was 3, Helena gave birth to twin girls, Rose and Lily, who had their mother's auburn hair and their father's gray-green eyes. The ranch house rang with laughter and the sound of small feet running. Helena's sewing business grew, and she eventually took on an apprentice, a young woman from town who reminded her of herself at that age, alone and looking for opportunity. Zachary's ranch prospered, his cattle becoming known throughout California for their quality. Through it all, they never forgot how they had found each other. Every Sunday, the entire family would go to the chapel together. The children learned to pray in that simple wooden structure, and Helena and Zachary would often stay behind after the others left, kneeling side by side in the same spot where they had first met. "You ever think about what would have happened if I had not gone to the chapel that day?" Zachary asked one evening, 10 years after they had first met. Their children were playing outside under Mrs. Chen's watchful eye, their laughter drifting through the open windows. Helena considered the question seriously. "I think I would have kept running until I collapsed. I was so tired, so afraid, so alone. If you had not found me, had not offered help without judgment, I do not know if I would have survived. And I would have kept existing but not truly living," Zachary said, taking her hand. "You gave me a reason to look forward instead of backward, to hope instead of simply remember." "We saved each other then," Helena said softly. "We did," Zachary agreed. "And we continue to save each other every day in small ways and large ones." As they sat in the peaceful chapel, the setting sun painting the walls gold, Helena reflected on the strange and winding path that had brought her here. From seamstress to fugitive to wife and mother, her life had transformed in ways she could never have imagined. The fear and trauma of that night in Sacramento had faded to a distant memory, no longer defining her but simply part of the journey that had led her to this moment. She looked at Zachary, still handsome despite the additional gray in his hair, still strong and steady and kind. She thought of their children, happy and healthy and full of life. She thought of the community they had built, the friends they had made, the life they had created together. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" Zachary asked, though his eyes were knowing. "For kneeling beside me that day. For praying for our future together when I could not imagine having any future at all. For believing in me when I had stopped believing in myself." Zachary brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "I would do it all again in a heartbeat. You are my blessing, Helena. You and our children. You are everything I prayed for and more than I deserved." "We deserve each other," Helena corrected gently. "Two broken people who found wholeness together." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Through the window, they could hear Samuel teaching his sisters a song, his young voice clear and pure. Mrs. Chen called them in for supper, her tone affectionate and scolding at once. "We should go," Zachary said, though he made no move to rise. "One more minute," Helena said, resting her head on his shoulder. "I just want to appreciate this moment, this feeling of perfect contentment." Zachary wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "We have a lifetime of these moments ahead of us," and they did. As the years continued to pass, Helena and Zachary grew old together, surrounded by their children and eventually their grandchildren. The ranch remained prosperous, passing to Samuel when Zachary decided to retire, though he never truly stopped working the land he loved. Helena's sewing room became a gathering place for the women of San Andreas, a space where they could come to learn, to talk, to find community. She never forgot what it felt like to be alone and afraid, and she made it her mission to ensure that no woman in her community had to feel that way if she could help it. The chapel stood as a testament to faith and second chances, a place where the town gathered for weddings and baptisms, for funerals and celebrations. Everyone knew the story of how the Garretts had met there, how a desperate prayer had brought them together. It became something of a local legend, a reminder that sometimes the darkest moments could lead to the brightest futures. On their 30th anniversary, Helena and Zachary returned to the chapel alone, silver-haired but still walking hand in hand. They knelt in the same spot where they had first prayed together, their movements slower now but no less reverent. "Lord," Zachary prayed, his voice still strong despite his years, 30 years ago you brought this woman into my life when I needed her most. Thank you for every day we have had together, for every joy and every challenge we have faced side by side. Thank you for our children and grandchildren, for this community, for this land. Thank you for taking my prayer for our future and exceeding every hope I had. Thank you for giving me a home when I was lost," Helena added, tears sliding down her weathered cheeks. "Thank you for this man who saw past my fear and my mistakes to the person I could become. Thank you for a life filled with love and purpose. Thank you for answered prayers." They rose together, helping each other to their feet with the ease of long practice. As they walked out of the chapel into the golden California afternoon, their hands still clasped, Helena paused to look back at the simple wooden structure. "What are you thinking?" Zachary asked. "That I am so grateful I decided to pray that day," Helena said, "that I did not give up hope." "So am I," Zachary said, kissing her temple gently. "So am I." They walked back to the ranch house where their family waited, where supper would soon be served, where laughter and love filled every room. It was a simple life in many ways, but it was theirs, built on a foundation of faith, forgiveness, and the miraculous meeting of two lonely souls in a wooden chapel on a California ranch. And every Sunday, without fail, they returned to that chapel to pray. Sometimes they prayed with their family, sometimes alone, but they always remembered to give thanks for the day when a rancher found a woman praying, knelt beside her, and prayed for a future they would spend the rest of their lives building together. The town of San Andreas grew and changed over the decades. The gold rush became history, the Wild West slowly gave way to civilization. But the Garrett Ranch remained, a constant in the shifting landscape, and the chapel stood as a reminder that sometimes the most important prayers are the ones we pray when we have nothing left but faith. Helena lived to be 78 years old, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. When she passed peacefully in her sleep, Zachary held her hand, whispering prayers of thanksgiving for every moment they had shared. He followed her just 6 months later, unable to bear a world without her in it. They were buried side by side in the small cemetery behind the chapel, their headstones simple, but bearing an inscription that told their whole story. two souls united in prayer, bound by love, joined forever in eternal rest. Their descendants continued to work the ranch, to gather in the chapel, to tell the story of how it all began. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun set golden over the California hills, people swore they could see two figures kneeling in the chapel, praying side by side, a testament to love that transcended even death. The legacy of Helena and Zachary Garrett lived on in the family they created, in the community they nurtured, in the faith they demonstrated. They had taken their broken pieces and built something beautiful, proving that it is never too late for redemption, never too late for love, never too late for answered prayers. And in the end, that was the greatest lesson of their lives together. That hope is never truly lost, that second chances do exist, and that sometimes the most important moments of our lives begin with a simple prayer in a simple chapel, spoken by a desperate heart and heard by someone willing to kneel beside us and pray for a future we might share. Their story became legend in San Andreas, passed down through generations, a reminder that love can be found in the most unexpected places, and that faith can lead us through the darkest valleys into the brightest dawns. The chapel still stands, maintained by the Garrett family, open to anyone who needs a place to pray, to hope, to believe that their story is not yet finished. Because that is what Helena and Zachary taught everyone who knew them, that no matter how dark the night, dawn always comes. That no matter how lost we feel, we can be found. That no matter how alone we think we are, there is always someone willing to kneel beside us and pray for the future we might build together. And that, in the end, is the greatest love story of all.